All right, get ready to be whisked away to the Scottish Highlands because today we're diving into Love Scotland.
It looks like it's a newsletter just packed with tips for experiencing Scotland to the fullest.
And this one really dives into the heart of Scottish culture, starting with its most recognizable symbol, tartan.
Ah, yes. Those iconic plaid patterns.
This newsletter claims you can actually trace someone's family history just by the colors in their tartan, like some kind of secret code.
It's amazing how these cultural symbols can take on a life of their own. The article, The Real History of Tartan, which they link in the newsletter, talks all about it.
Oh, yeah, I saw that. Cooey is the source for that one.
If I recall correctly, it's about how the idea of clan tartans being tied to specific families is more of a Victorian-era invention.
Right. They were saying it was basically a clever marketing tactic to sell more textiles.
It really makes you wonder how many other traditions have been reinterpreted throughout history.
Exactly. It makes you want to double check everything you thought you knew.
It's a good reminder to dig a little deeper, look beyond the surface. But even if the strict tartan code isn't entirely accurate, you have to admit, the artistry and craftsmanship of tartan are still a big part of Scotland's cultural identity.
Absolutely. And speaking of experiencing Scotland firsthand, this newsletter has me itching for a road trip. They highlight all those breathtaking landscapes, from the rugged mountains to those windswept coastlines.
It's amazing the variety that you find in Scotland. They really capture that spirit of adventure.
Imagine driving those coastal roads with the wind in your hair.
Definitely sounds exhilarating.
And of course, no trip to Scotland would be complete without visiting at least one historic site, right? And this newsletter mentions that Edinburgh Castle is having special events for Halloween this year.
Oh, wow. I imagine those would be pretty popular.
Oh, for sure. Can you imagine exploring those ancient halls at night, maybe hearing some ghost stories? It'd be amazing.
A bit spooky, but definitely atmospheric. It's really incredible how well Scotland blends its historical elements into modern life. Speaking of which, this newsletter also mentioned a historic hotel in Edinburgh that's opening a brand new restaurant. Talk about a cool blend of old and new.
I love how they've preserved so much of their heritage. But if you're looking for a truly traditional taste of Scotland, the newsletter points us towards the Isle of Skye.
Home to some of the best whiskey in the world, if I'm not mistaken.
Exactly. They say it's been producing Scotch whiskey there since at least 1830.
That's quite the history. Though if you're looking for something a little less, shall we say, potent, there's always Dunfermline Abbey.
Oh, right. That's the final resting place of Scottish kings and queens, isn't it?
That's right. It sounds like an incredible journey back in time.
This newsletter also mentions something called the Great Kilt. Apparently, it's this traditional garment, but they describe it as a giant wrap. It's a little hard to picture.
Well, luckily for us, they linked an article titled, How to Wear the Grandfather of the Modern Kilt.
Perfect. Maybe we can figure that whole giant wrap thing out.
It's amazing, though, how these traditional garments are still around today.
Yeah, it really shows how powerful these links to the past can be.
And speaking of connections to the past, this newsletter wants to prepare everyone for what's coming up in the next year. Apparently, tourism in Scotland is expected to be absolutely huge.
Yeah, it seems like Scotland's really having a moment, and rightfully so. It's probably a good idea to book those trips in advance.
Absolutely. Those tickets to Edinburgh Castle for Halloween are probably going to disappear quickly.
So to our listener, if you're even thinking about a trip to Scotland,
Now might be the perfect time.
whether you're picturing yourself climbing those misty mountains,
Or maybe sipping whiskey by a crackling fire.
this newsletter has certainly given us a lot to think about.
It's amazing how just reading a few articles can transport you to a completely different place.
From the vibrant colors of tartan to those iconic Highland cows.
And don't forget about that amazing food. The newsletter even included a little reminder to try some traditional Scottish shortbread.
Now that's what I call a perfect ending to a Scottish adventure. Speaking of which, that article about how to wear the grandfather of the modern kilt really piqued my interest. Have you ever actually seen someone wearing a great kilt? I can't say I have, but now I'm dying to see a picture. You know what else I haven't seen in person?
What's that?
Those adorable Highland cows. And this newsletter just had to mention them right when we were talking about Scottish treats.
Right. They reminded us to try some traditional Scottish shortbread, preferably with a view.
Okay, you're killing me with these visuals. Now I absolutely have to add shortbread picnic in the Highlands to my bucket list.
With a few Highland cows grazing in the background,
Of
naturally.
course, it wouldn't be a proper Highland picnic without them. Speaking of things we can't forget, Those Halloween events at Edinburgh Castle.
Oh, right. Those sounded incredible.
I know. Imagine like as the sun sets and the air gets all crisp and spooky.
I can practically hear the whispers of ghost stories already.
Right. Makes you wonder what those ancient walls have seen.
Scotland seems like it's just overflowing with stories and legends, doesn't it?
Totally. For our listener, I'm curious. What's captivated you the most so far?
Are you picturing yourself climbing a misty mountain or maybe dancing at a sealid?
This newsletter has definitely sparked our wanderlust.
It really has, from those incredible landscapes to the vibrant culture.
Scotland has it all.
And this newsletter has been a fantastic guide to all of it. They've given some really great recommendations.
Totally. So for our listener, what's got you reaching for your passport? Are you picturing yourself in a kilt? Maybe even trying to wrangle a great kilt?
It sounds like quite the experience.
Or maybe you're cozy by a fireplace, whiskey in hand, with some traditional music playing.
Now that's an image.
I have to say, this deep dive has been quite the journey. We've learned about the myths surrounding Tartan, explored spooky Edinburgh Castle, and even hung out with some Highland cows, at least in our minds.
We've covered a lot of ground. And we even found a music festival along the way.
Oh, right. Imagine being there, hearing that music live.
It really adds a whole other dimension to the experience, doesn't it?
For sure. This newsletter did a great job of highlighting those unique cultural experiences. They went way beyond just listing the tourist traps.
Absolutely. It really gives you a feel for what it's like to actually be in Scotland, to experience the culture.
And that's what we want for our listeners, right? Whether you're a history enthusiast or a nature lover, or even if you're just curious about other cultures.
There's something for everyone in Scotland.
This newsletter has given us a fantastic glimpse into all of it. The history, the landscapes, the traditions, even the flavors.
From those rugged mountains to that delicious shortbread.
It's been quite the adventure. So until next time, happy travels, everyone, whether you're exploring Scotland in person or just through these incredible stories.
We'll see you on our next deep dive.